Welcome to Coming to America. StoryCorps celebrates stories of immigration. I'm Amanda Plumb with StoryCorps Atlanta. Our mission is to provide Americans of all backgrounds and beliefs with the opportunity to record, share, and preserve the stories of our lives. Since 2003, StoryCorps has collected and archived more than 30,000 interviews with more than 60,000 participants. Each conversation is recorded on a free CD to share and is preserved in the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress. StoryCorps is one of the largest oral history projects of its kind. However, StoryCorps is different than other oral history projects because it's a conversation between two loved ones, mother and son, best friends, partners. Those 40 minutes can be about anything, sharing favorite memories, asking hard questions, telling someone what they mean to you, and learning something new about a loved one. We believe that everyone has a story to tell, and everyone's story is important. We share these stories through our weekly broadcast on NPR, our podcasts, books, and our animation series. And tonight is another opportunity for us to share some of those stories with you. StoryCorps airs a national segment every Friday morning in Morning Edition. But here in Atlanta, we're lucky enough to be able to hear a local story every Tuesday because we partner with WABE 90.1. So on Tuesdays, you can hear StoryCorps in the morning on Morning Edition and also on City Cafe. The stories you'll hear tonight were all recorded here in Atlanta and were edited by WABE's Dana Goldman. And at StoryCorps, we have a reputation for making people cry. So before we get started, if people want to grab a tissue, I'd recommend that. So tonight we're here to celebrate stories of immigration. In the past year and a half that StoryCorps has been in Atlanta, we've recorded over 1,200 stories with more than 2,500 participants who were born in 79 different countries. Tonight we'll listen to just a few of the stories recorded by fellow Atlantans who have immigrated from their home countries to the United States. For some, the move happened generations ago. For others, the city is still new, a bewildering place. We've heard the entire range of life-changing experiences, the joys, challenges, losses, and accomplishments tied up with leaving one's home country to settle someplace new. Through these stories, we hope to help immigrants and their descendants share their culture and their traditions with the public and celebrate our shared humanity. We want everyone to have a voice. These days, we hear a lot in the news about immigration, but it's not often that we hear the voices of those who have immigrated to the United States. For example, Gabby Pacheco is one of the undocumented immigrants we hear so much about these days. Her family moved to the United States from Ecuador when she was 7. Without visas that would enable them to live, work, and study here. In high school, she pushed herself to take college-level classes, but a scheduling conflict before her senior year meant choosing between two loves.
So in the summer, my counselor contacts me and says, "Oh, Gabby, you have to decide either your AP environmental class, which was for my meteorology studies, or your AP music theory class." And meteorology was what I loved to do since 6th grade. But music has always been my passion. So I called my music teacher and I tell him, "Oh, Mr. Corey, this situation that I have, what can I do?" He already knew that I was undocumented, and he's like, "Gabby, you have to, decide on your own." He says, "Why don't you do something? Why don't you pray and ask God to tell you?" And I'm thinking, yeah, like God is gonna come down and tell me, choose this class. It's so simple, it's like I have to make the decision. God is not gonna worry about that. So I kind of just shrugged that off, called my dad. My dad tells me something very similar. And so I said, fine, I shrugged him off too, and then I called my sister. And my sister tells me almost the same exact thing. So I'm like, okay, fine. And that night, before going to sleep, I start the prayer, and I'm like, "God, please tell me, I don't know what to do." And as I'm telling you, I'm like, I fell asleep. That was my prayer. So that night, I have a dream that we are going on a trip with my family, and I hear like somebody playing the violin, the Minuet in G song, and they will only play the first phrase. So it would go da 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 da. It would stop and it would start again. Da 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 da. And I had to look for where the sound is coming from. And I see a little girl, and she has a violin, and she's in a wheelchair. And in the dream, I knew that she was autistic. And as I approach her, she looks up at me and gives me the violin. And I play the song for her, and when I finish, I give it back to her, and I wake up and I hear music therapy.
Wow.
And I'm like, music therapy? What is it? And I'm freaking out because I don't know what this dream means. And I had an appointment at 9:30 to see the counselor, and it was like 9:10. So I run to the school, and I'm like, God, I don't know what this means, music therapy. Do you want me to work with, autistic children? And as I'm coming in, I say, God, please give me a sign that this is what you want me to do. So as I'm saying that, I bump into a lady. She'd been a lady that I had known that works in the school. So I asked her, oh, what are you doing here? She's like, oh, I'm working with autistic kids. And I just get chills, and I'm like, okay, I have to go. And when I go into the counselor's office, I tell her, I know what I have to do. I know what I have to do. And she's like, oh, I'm sorry, we already made a decision. And I said, why? Like, I know what I have to do. And she tells me, well, the principal came in this morning and said not to take you out of the music class, that there was a purpose for you to be in there. And so I sat down, I started crying, I started telling her the story. She's crying, and that's where my desire to work with autistic people and work with them through music therapy, that started.
Gabby and her friend Carlos Roa visited Atlanta StoryCorps during the Trail of Dreams, a 1,500-mile walk from Miami to Washington, D.C., to raise awareness about the issues facing undocumented young people. But immigration is not a new phenomenon. Decades before Gabby was born and thousands of miles away, Monia Dombrowski had a very different reason to immigrate to the United States. A Poland native, Monia was just a baby when Nazis came and expelled the Jews from her town during the Holocaust. When she finally made it to the shores of New York, more than a decade later, she was determined to forget. But these days, the Dunwoody resident is doing her best to remember. She is part of a support group for Holocaust survivors, and she came to StoryCorps Atlanta with her daughter, Stacy Kelberman, to share her story.
I can't imagine that there's any way to describe how growing up in the middle of a war has affected your life.
My father being taken away, my sister dying. After the war, my mother, she decided to come back to Poland, to the town where she was born and I was born. I was 7, so we came, and the Polish people didn't want any Jews, so they hired a guide to lead us out of Poland. At night, my mother, she held my hand and told me to be quiet so that we would not be shot. And we walked all night till we came to the American zone in Germany. And we lived in a displaced persons camp until 1951, when the immigration quota allowed us to immigrate to the United States.
And you must have been about 14 at the time when you
13.
came. You were 13.
I did not speak one word of English. I had never spoken on the telephone. I had never ridden an elevator. And I had named myself Marion. I wanted to feel that I belonged. And I was like everybody else.
And you lived on the Lower East Side for how many years?
Until I graduated from high school. I was 18, and then I became a naturalized citizen.
Do you remember the ceremony when you became a
do.
naturalized citizen?
I was very proud. I remember they asked me who the President of the United States was, and they asked me who George Washington was. And I thought, they think I'm stupid. I don't know this very basic information. So they I just answer the question, and that certificate saying I'm a citizen is probably the most cherished one that I own. This document states that I am an American citizen. And when I go traveling, and I'm afraid to go traveling to Eastern European countries because I'm afraid they won't let me out again. And I'll be stuck there. So I only go to Western European countries when I travel.
I can understand that.
When I felt healthy enough, I went back to my original name, which is Manya. I was in my 50s.
I was really proud of you when you changed your name. I thought that Manya suited you better than Marion did. I thought you felt more comfortable with the name Manya. You seemed to feel more comfortable with yourself when you changed your name to Manya, because that was the name you grew up with. And it was really wonderful to see that you were able to go back to that you were able to go back to something in your childhood, and it was not painful for you. It was not something you had to repress.
I'm glad you told me that. I didn't know that. I love the name Manya because it belongs to me.
Immigration can mean leaving one difficult situation only to find oneself in another. 21-year-old Lubna Rashid and her mother, Lamia Azawi, came to Georgia just last year after spending the last 12 years in Jordan. Before that, they fled Iraq. Now they're trying to rebuild their life in a country that's been at odds with their homeland for the last decade, and that hasn't been so easy for either of them.
So, Lubna, I want to ask you, did you have special expectations when we came here to America?
Well,
Because I know you aim a lot and you are
yeah,
so...
I'm a daydreamer.
Yeah.
And well, I did have, and I still do have a lot of expectations. I want to continue my education. I already have a bachelor's in biotechnology and genetics. Now I'm working in research, but the one thing that I expected that was not really, that did not really achieve as quickly as I wanted was to mingle in the society more easily. Like,
Yeah.
for now, even some of our neighbors, like when we got here and the first day they saw us and like, hey, how are you, and stuff like that. The second day is like, where are you guys from? I said, well, from Iraq. They stopped saying hello.
Yeah.
They stopped
Yeah.
saying hello altogether. And it's like,
Yeah.
what do you know about me?
Yeah, and when they see me and with my veil, it's just like I'm an alien.
Like, when I started working, my colleagues in the first time, I mean, everything was fine. We have like a formal colleague-to-colleague relationship. And now, after a while, like, one of the girls I work with, she's like a normal American girl, and she's like, you know what? You're not that different. And I'm like, really? What did you expect? And she's like, I don't know, but something else. Like, you're not like what we expected. And then she met my mom, and she's like, your mom is so beautiful, and your family is so beautiful. It's like, we don't know that stuff. So I told her that, well, grab a book. That's the first thing you should do. And she's actually reading a book now called The Arabs.
Mm-hmm.
I got so
Yeah,
excited. Like,
yeah.
really? That's interesting.
They are confused between the things that they have heard and the things that they are seeing you about.
Yeah. And it actually, for some Arabs and Iraqis, it goes the opposite way as well, because many of us come here expecting things differently. And when you deal with the people, it's like, why are they talking like that? Why do they joke like that? Why do they eat like that? And it's like, I'm pretty sure they're saying the same things about us.
Yeah, maybe.
Everyone should treat us the same, I guess.
I think time will manage this.
Time will change
thing.
that. I'm pretty sure time will.
So I think life is mostly not what have you left past, but what do you aim? Every time has its own
Beauty.
Beauty,
yes,
yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess it's never too late. We hear of people getting married at the age of 90 these days. So,
Yeah.
you
The
know,
most
it's
important
never too
thing
late.
to make goals to put goals in your life.
And it's never too late to carry yourself over to somewhere and step your foot in other places. Yeah, it's never too late to start over.
Lubna and Lemia recorded their conversation when we visited Refugee Women's Network. And according to the United Nations, a refugee is a person who flees his or her home country due to well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion. 12-year-old Teso McDonald also knows the definition of refugee. His mother, Naima Abdullahi, came to the U.S. from Kenya with her parents almost 20 years ago at age 11. Her father had escaped persecution in Ethiopia before she was born. Again, when we visited Refugee Women's Network, the two sat down and talked about what it means to be a refugee.
Do you know what refugees are?
Yeah.
Can you tell me?
Refugees are people that are forced into another country because of problems in their home country.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good answer. That's a very good answer. So that's exactly those my problems in my dad's home country. So he was forced to leave and go into Kenya. And you know what the funny thing was? When I was a little kid, it's like my parents would pull me out of class so we can go to some refugee office to go do some paperwork or whatever. And in my school, there wasn't any other refugee kids. If they knew I was a refugee, I wouldn't be allowed to go to that school. So we just never said anything. So one day I was absent for 2 days, and then I came to school, and the teacher asked me in front of everybody, "So Naima, why didn't you come to school for the last 2 days?" And all I could see in my mind was a big sign in front of the office that said refugee, but then I knew in my head that I shouldn't say that because then everybody would tease me, and I was like 9 years old, and I was so embarrassed of the word refugee. So I stood in front of the class just silent.
So, what did you think America was going to be like?
The one thing I knew is I knew the capital was Washington, D.C. I knew that. And then we were going to this place called San Jose, San Jose, but we didn't know about Spanish and how you pronounce J's there. So for months, we told everybody we're going to San Jose.
How did you choose my name?
I really wanted you to have an African or an Oromo first name. And that was really, really important to me, We chose the name Teso. What I love about it, it's the meaning of it. Chosen place and time. So it fits you perfectly, I think. Do you like it?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah?
It's hard for people to remember. Whenever I tell people what my name is, they're like, Jason?
Tyson?
Yeah.
Yeah, I got a lot of Tysons. Yeah.
It just adds on to my mixed cultures.
So do you see being a refugee as a culture? Or
It's a big deal. It's as big as a culture.
And I'm happy that you see it that way. I chose to work with refugees because of my own experience of growing up in America. And it makes me think about what you might want to do when you grow up. What do you think you want to do when you grow up?
I'd like to be a doctor.
Really?
Yeah, so I can work as a doctor to make a lot of money, then go down to Africa. I can start basically a virus in reverse by teaching people how to teach other people to be doctors.
Yes.
So that will spread and they can help themselves.
You know what that's called?
What?
Self-sufficiency. And that's exactly what I do. I help refugees become self-sufficient here in America. So maybe you can go and do the same thing in Africa.
Yeah.
That would be awesome. That would make my job so much easier here.
It would.
Yeah. I love you very much, and thank you so much for doing this with me, okay? I know you're hungry.
Naima isn't the only mother who traveled across the world to try to find a better life for her family. Sarah Takala fled her home country in Ethiopia decades ago. She had spent more than 20 years now navigating this country, not only as an immigrant, but as the mother of a special needs son. Her son Abraham is 21 years old and autistic. While he doesn't speak at all, Sarah does, and she spent her life in the United States speaking for him. At StoryCorps Atlanta, she told her friend Artie Sehagal about Abram's autism and how it shaped her life.
It was shock, disbelief. You don't want to hear this kind of bad things you don't hear.
Right.
But immediately I sensed something happy too. There is opportunity to improve his life. Back home, what you call the stigma, stigma. Once you have a disability, like they take it as a curse. There is no any
Resources there.
resources, so that's it. Here, I said, my son born in the United States, so he's not going to be treated like back door in my country. So I decided that day I'm going to do whatever I can do to my son to improve his life.
What are the challenges that you faced here, bringing up Abraham?
Oh, the challenging is very, very, the system is very good, but still there is always class, money, status. Still,
The economics.
economic status is challenging. Financial is a tough challenge.
So what were the surprises that you had when you had Abraham and bringing him up in this?
Well, there is many surprises. He changed my life, actually. Thinking, the way I think. Actually, the whole family thinking is different now. Before him, my thinking was success is different way to get good degree, extra money, life. After I got Abraham, my thinking is always I have to make sure he's safe. He got what he needs. Is my priority, and not only him. I just committed to help those kind of people. That's the love, care and giving for those needy people is the most important thing for me. So my thinking is really make paradigm shift.
So you measure success now not by materialism, but by love,
caring, giving. That's to me the most important thing I learned from him. He changed my life. Abraham is a gift for me. Everybody have a children. Always those children they're gonna go they're gonna be doctor. They're gonna have this. Abraham, I know he's not gonna do that, but still he's my son. I love him. He make me happy.
Yep.
That is the most important thing for me.
Sarah and Artie's conversation was recorded in partnership with the Georgia Council on Developmental Disabilities. And Sarah is with us tonight, and I'd like to invite her up to say a few words.
First, thank you for this opportunity you gave us. Second, yes, the reason Artie and me, we involved with this is, to let Atlanta residents, all immigrants are not only immigrants. When we live as immigrants, we are sharing all kind of things, goods and bad. So when I came United States to live here, I never expected I'm going to have a disabled child. But I have, and I learn. I go long journey, learning how to live with this kind of challenge, and I'm really sharing this kind of experience for immigrants and native born Americans. So this is the reason I am involved in this. We know as immigrant, you have to learn how to live, how to survive in this society. Learning as just like child born here and start growing. When we, even if we are came as a grown person, but we have to learn many things from the beginning. And especially when you have disability, you have to learn another challenging thing to survive in this society, in this world. So, this is the one I just want to let you know. And thank you.
Thank you. May is Asian Pacific American Month. Last year, the Asian Pacific American Historical Society invited StoryCorps to do a day of recordings at the APA Heritage Month event at the National Archives in Morrow, Georgia. Mother and daughter, Teresa and Stephanie Nguyen, recorded their story that day. Teresa was a child in Saigon when the Communist Party took over in the 1970s. That experience of war has shaped her life ever since, including the parenting of her children, Matthew and Stephanie.
I think even from a young age, I understood that your childhood was very different than our childhood.
Right. I remember the fall of Saigon. I was there in the front with the whole family looking out on the street because our house is only a block from the presidential palace. We were only a block away from them. And we stood out in the front watching all these tanks roll into the city with the communist soldiers on those tanks. It was just chaos. And I was very young at the time. I didn't understand much, but I know I have 3 brothers who died in that war. We tried to escape from Vietnam 11 times. I am the boat person. I was on a 22-meter long, and it packed 286 people on it. 286 people on a boat going through a storm. The boat got beaten up and broke apart. And we were lucky to get to shore alive. We got to a little town in Thailand in the middle of the night. And we were taken into the refugee camp, and I stayed in that camp for about a year before I was allowed to come to the United States.
You came to the States when you were, what, like 16?
Yeah,
14, 16?
I was 17. And I lived on that. And so to me, anything after that, to me, piece of cake. That's why I run my family. Sometimes you and Matthew refer to as a sweatshop because I'm so tough. I run the military style, but it's all in good hearts, good intention. But deep down inside, I'm soft too. I'm very soft.
I know.
I can cry easily.
You're a big, mushy, soft
Yes.
person. I know that.
Yeah. I know a lot of times, you guys, in your mind, you always think of your daddy as the favorite parent.
Oh, no.
It's okay. I don't mind, because somebody has to play the bad guy. So that's fine. I don't mind, as long as you guys turn out good, turn out great, and that's all I want.
That's terrible. I don't want you to think that either one of us loves one more than the... I'm not going to make it through this.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I don't have a problem with that.
Whether I think you see it or not, Matthew and I are both very appreciative of everything that you've been through.
By the way, I'm very, very proud of you. I never say so, but I'm very proud. I'm just one of those old Asian moms and dads. We never say we love you. We expect you to see it through our actions. But I can't find myself to saying it, I guess because being 48 is not like old as dirt. But to me, it's old enough for me to carry with me, that baggage, that excess feelings. But I'm learning. I'm learning to say it.
I'm glad that you're proud of me because most of the time I feel like I'm a disappointment.
No, you are not. You are not. When I go away from this life, I want you to remember my love for you, that's all.
This is why we passed out the tissues, guys. In addition addition to airing on WABE, this story also was, a different version was aired nationally on NPR as well. And today, Teresa and Stephanie are here, and they're going to come up and talk a little bit about their experience at StoryCorps.
Hi. So listening to that, I'm crying again because I am the big baby. I don't really know how to describe the experience because walking into it, you would never have believed that we turned into two blubbering babies in the middle of the session. I mean, we were joking and we were laughing, and then we get in there and you kind of get into the zone, and anyone in the audience who has recorded a story, you kind of know this feeling. Everything is really quiet and you're just really focused on each other. And it almost becomes a really intimate, cathartic experience. It's like things that you wouldn't normally talk about if you were sitting around your kitchen table all of a sudden are brought to light. And for me, at least, being there and recording the story with my mom and kind of reliving with her everything that she went through was a lot more than I could handle, and I wasn't there. And I think so often kids like us who have parents who immigrated or have been through all of these really traumatic and dramatic events in their lives, you don't realize that it actually happened and that they actually lived through it. Because for us, we learned about it in school, we read about it in a textbook. You don't have that context behind it. And, I'm gonna let my mom talk a good bit kind of about her story because this really was more about her than anything else, but it just overwhelms me with love and admiration, and I could not be more grateful for my mom, for who she is, both my parents, because they both went through it. And it's thanks to them and what they went through that I'm able to have the life that I have today.
Well, I did not mean for the story all about myself, but it just turned out to be that way, honestly. Stephanie and I, we never really had a very close talk or heart-to-heart talk. So after that, I always I always looked for a way somehow to open myself up to talk to Stephanie, but the opportunity never came. So when I found out about StoryCorps, I thought maybe if I could just ask her to come with me and do a fun story, that will be an opening. That will carve a little door for me into her heart. But I did not intend it to be really like that. I did not want to tell her my experience so that she would cry, I would cry, and we even made that gentleman who sat there listening to us, he cried too. So it was. But I have to tell you that after that experience, I grew a lot closer to Stephanie, and I feel a lot more comfortable talking to her now, even though a lot of times I really have to try very hard. Deep down, I take a deep breath. Should I say it? Should I say it? Should I open myself up? But thanks to that experience. So if you haven't recorded a story, I strongly encourage you to do that. Every story that StoryCorps get, it doesn't mean that they will air it, but at least you are doing yourself a good service. At least you have some fun doing it, and maybe you'll get a bonus out of it, like we are getting a little bit closer from that recording. So the booths out there, I don't know if they're still open or not, but come out there and sign up.
Thank you guys so much. I think you guys can just do my job. I'm just going to take you guys everywhere to make people do StoryCorps. At StoryCorps, we're committed to having the stories that we record and preserve and share reflect the diversity of the communities where we live. In order to do this, we partner with community organizations to make sure that we're reaching out to participants who don't know about StoryCorps or may not otherwise have access to the experience. Many of the stories that you've heard here tonight are the results of partnerships with different organizations, such as Refugee Women's Network, the Asian Pacific American Historical Society, the Georgia Council on Developmental Disabilities, and Galeo. We work with organizations in a variety of ways. Some organizations schedule appointments for their members to come to the StoryCorps booth at WABE to record stories. Other organizations borrow our Story Kit, which is a portable recording device so they can record their own stories. Last summer, interns from the Segal radio station used the Story Kit to interview each other, and then they made a half-hour-long program about their experiences. Right now, our Story Kit is in LaGrange, Georgia, with Alterna Community, and they work with families of people who are in detention, in immigration detention. So they're recording stories right now. Still, other groups host a day of recording at their facilities. For example, earlier this year, the Global Village School invited StoryCorps to spend a day recording stories with their students. The Global Village School provides an enriched education to teenage girls whose formal education has been interrupted by war and refugee camp experiences. Here to talk about their experience with StoryCorps are Linda Smiley and Nora Muhammad.
Nora's the beautiful one right here. As Amanda told you, our school educates teenage refugee girls who have come from all parts of the world and are attempting to learn English very well, get integrated into American schools, either high schools or junior college or college, depending on the age at which they come. What happened earlier this year, our school has been in existence for 2 years. I started this year, and at the very beginning of the school year, I was approached at a party by a friend of mine whose daughter is a student at the Atlanta Girls' School. This 10th grader said to me that she was really interested in doing a project with our school. So instead of just having the girls come and bring books or something like that, I am a very big fan of StoryCorps and thought that it would be a good idea for the girls to interview each other. It's different than most of the stories that you've heard so far because these girls did not know each other at all at the beginning. So we had to do a little bit of getting to know you type of things. We went over to the Atlanta Girls' School one afternoon, and the girls had pizza together, met each other, talked a little bit. And a few weeks later, our school is located in Decatur at the Decatur Presbyterian Church. One of the rooms, the children's library, became our recording studio. So 6 pairs of girls from our school and the Atlanta Girls' School recorded each other in one long day of recording, and it was a lot of fun. It was an interesting, as you know, those of you who have done the recordings know that the part that you hear on the radio is a very small part of the actual interview. So it was an interesting set of interviews. We had one student who sang in the middle, have a whole performance there. Nora had a very good time with her partner, who had a lot in common. In fact, Nora had specially requested after the get to know you session to work with Shelby, her partner, and it was a really good experience, I think, for her. As far as the overall experience, I believe that these girls who really, on the surface, did not have a lot in common, found out that they did have more in common than they thought. Even though they didn't know each other, a lot of the stories centered around their families, their experiences on the weekends, just the kind of things that teenagers like to talk about. And they all realized that they had stories to tell. And so I'm going to if you'd like to ask Nora if she'd like to say anything particular about her experience with Shelby, it would be great. But Nora's one of our very best students. So.
I had a lot of fun. Shelby, the girl I interviewed, and I talked about our families and school and a lot of things. We had a lot in common. We both like to travel, and it was fun. Thank you.
year, we partnered with the Georgia Association of Latino Elected Officials, GALEO, to host an entire day of interviews at the Story booth. One of the pairs of participants that GALEO recruited were Laura Mavartin and her husband, Michael Rim. These days, Laura is director of a national wine franchise and the president of the Atlanta Latina Business Association. But when she first came to the United States from Mexico City with her family as a child, her jobs weren't nearly so glamorous. At StoryCorps Atlanta, Michael asked her about those early days.
I'm always amazed at some of the jobs that you had when you were growing up. And can you tell me a little bit about some of the things that you...
Mm-hmm. Well, again, we grew up in a small town in Minnesota, population 4,200. And it was a farming town. And so a lot of the kids during the summer would work in the bean fields and in the cornfields. And so that's what my sister and I did. You could work there when you were 12. But as I grew older, I went to work with my mom in the chicken processing plant in Butterfield, Minnesota. I was 16, and I would wear the apron and the metal glove, and I'd have 5 sharp knives on the counter next to me, and I would stand there for 8 hours a day with the hairnet. And I remember I hated the hairnet, and the chickens would be going by in these hangers in this conveyor belt, and I was responsible for cutting a certain part of the chicken just over and over and over for 8 hours a day. And then I worked with my father, too. He and I worked at a... It was kind of, they processed corn after it was picked in the fields. And we worked the night shift. And we would just sit there and pick out the bad corn for 8 hours. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, I'm doing the same work that my father is doing. I'm getting paid the same amount that my father is getting paid. And I never got a sense that my father was ashamed or embarrassed or anything like that. He just, went to work with dignity. The other job we did, that actually was my least favorite job, all of us as a family, and again, this is when I was in high school, we would get in the car and we would go to a chicken farm. We would pick eggs, and we got paid some ridiculous amount, like 12 cents a dozen or something. And, when we got into the car, we had feathers and the chicken poop was all over the place. It was so smelly. It was disgusting. And one thing, when I was applying to graduate school, I wrote about some of these experiences as part of my essay for graduate school. And I gave my essay to my professor so that he would give me some, review it for me and give me some feedback. And I one thing that stands out is that on the margin he wrote, Laura, this is not believable. Children in the U.S. are not allowed to work in factories. And I remember thinking, wow, he lives in such a different world.
What is it that really drove you to be successful? I mean, this little immigrant kid coming to this country. You were the first person of your family to graduate from college.
And graduated with honors. I'm very proud of that because I could see the pride in my mom and dad. Mm-hmm. And, I guess maybe that's it. I mean, it was like at every turn, seeing their reaction, you can get addicted to that. Mm-hmm. You can get addicted to the look that your parents have when they're proud of you. Mm-hmm. To me, it's their success. It's hey, Mom and Dad, you did this. They earned it. It's theirs.
And tonight, Laura and Michael and their children are with us, and I'm going to invite them to come up and say a little bit about their experience with StoryCorps.
Well, I first would like to thank StoryCorps and WAB for giving us this wonderful opportunity. This has been an experience that has changed my life in a number of ways. But first, a couple of hints, a couple of suggestions. I would love for the picture to be taken before you record instead of after, because as most of you know, it is a very emotional time. Also, I was a huge fan of StoryCorps. When I received the opportunity to record, I was very excited and very nervous because I felt that it was such an important and such a unique opportunity. And so I think that I really was over nervous about it. I wanted it to be just right because I felt like this is my one chance to record the important things I want to share, and it'll be in the Library of Congress. And one of the reasons I was so nervous was because I wanted to honor my parents. That's one of the reasons why I was so excited about the opportunity. And not just my parents, but everyone else in the community where I grew up who helped us through the entire process. We came here as undocumented immigrants, and the community at that time embraced us, and it was like a Norman Rockwell type of experience. And so I wanted to acknowledge that. And I was able to share the recording with some key people in our lives. So I sent it to them, I went to visit them, and I gave it to them. The other experience was that my sister had not shared a lot of our history with her children. So when she shared the CD with them, they were just flabbergasted. They didn't know that we had come here undocumented. They didn't know that she and I had worked in the cornfields and bean fields and done that type of work. And so it was really eye-opening from a family history perspective to make sure that everyone is aware of what my parents had gone through and what we went through as we grew up. By the way, I need to introduce my family. This is Claudia, she's 7, and this is my son Nicholas, and of course my husband Michael. And they have, of course, heard the story, and they've heard a lot of immigrant stories, because I want them to know their culture. I want them to know where they come from. I want them to understand what's happening today with all of the immigration talk and all of the laws. I want them to understand it from different perspectives. So they probably know more than they'd like to know. But they've been great supporters, and that goes for my husband as well. But I would encourage all of you to participate. If I hear often that, well, I don't have anything interesting. I didn't come here as an undocumented, or I didn't have any significant experience. But what I have found out is that everyone has a story to tell. Whether you grew up in a small town, a big city, whether you've had any challenges that you feel are significant to other people, everyone has a story to share. And it may not seem important to you, but it's important to those around you. And I have seen that in many experiences as a result of StoryCorps. The other thing, I love StoryCorps' tagline, listening is an act of love. I love that, and I've tried to embrace that. Of course, in the interview, I'm the one talking all the time, so I'm working on that. But it is something that I've taken to heart. So I have gotten so many things out of this experience, and my mom and dad absolutely loved listening to the entire CD. They loved hearing this on the radio, and as a result, I was interviewed for the Mundo Hispánico. And of course, my parents love that. So again, thank you so much for the opportunity, and I hope that the rest of you get an opportunity to record your story and share it with your family and friends.
Well, I'd like to leave you guys with one last story. But before I do, I'd like to thank all of our speakers for coming tonight, and all the community organizations that have recruited immigrants and other folks to come and record their stories at StoryCorps. And a special thanks to our co-sponsors tonight, WABE 90.1 and the Auburn Avenue Research Library, which is part of the Atlanta-Fulton County Public Library System. And before you go, if you could fill out an evaluation form, this really helps the library with their programming and really helps, with funding and making sure these types of events continue to happen. I'd also like to acknowledge the Community Foundation of Greater Atlanta. Without their support, we would not be here today because they secured a grant to help us stay here through the end of the year. I'd also like to encourage each of you to continue to participate in StoryCorps. You can do that by listening to StoryCorps. So again, we're every Tuesday at 7:30 in the morning and 12:20 in the afternoon. That's our local StoryCorps Atlanta broadcast that you can hear only here in Atlanta. And then on Fridays, we have our national broadcast on Morning Edition at 6:20 and 8:20 in the morning. And of course, I'd like to encourage each of you to participate by recording your story. As Laura said, everybody has a story to tell, and we believe that your story is important. So before you leave, please go to the lobby. We have a computer set up where we can make a reservation for you tonight. You can come in and tell your story, or you could bring a friend or a family member in and interview them about their lives. And so now we have one last story for you. Many StoryCorps stories revolve around the theme of love, both romantic love and familial love. But when two families from different cultures are suddenly united by a budding romance, the clash of cultures can create some tension. And that was the case for Emil Tatanchi and his wife Louise. Emil is from Iraq and Louise is from Ireland. The two met in England in the 1970s and fell in love. At StoryCorps, they explained to their daughter Sarah that their families were not so supportive at the very beginning.
My parents came to England to visit, and they met Louise, and straight away they weren't very excited about her.
Why?
I guess they didn't like a foreigner. That's what it was. And the same thing happened really with Mom's family. For them to meet this guy, this foreigner, who doesn't look Irish, he has no red hair or blonde hair.
Baghdad, where's that?
And where's Baghdad, and this dark complexion with that mustache and the curly hair. I remember when I went there to meet the family, and here's her dad standing by the door, all red-faced and flustered and doesn't know what to do. But her brother-in-law said, how about we go across the road to the pub? It's what's called Seamus Pub. So they said, do you drink? I said, yes, I do. So we went to drink. That was a great experience. So we went to the bar, and here's the three of us. Her dad said, 3 beers. So we got 3 beers, and they started drinking. And I'm trying to catch up with them. And we finished these, and then he said 3 paddies. That's the Irish whiskey. So that's to wash it down. So that went down. And then Jack ordered 3 more beers, and that followed 3 paddies. By that time, with the first beer, I was standing up really to attention, very energetic. With the second beer, I was on the stool, one leg, and the other leg on the ground. So it was my turn, the third one. I ordered 3 beers and 3 paddies to follow, and by that time, my head was on the bar, falling asleep. I couldn't deal. So her dad came in, Louise's dad, and put his arm around me, and he said, I like you.
The Guinness and the paddy helped you, give you courage.
It helped to melt the differences between the cultures, that's for sure. Yeah, and we left with a good feeling. In fact, that's the other interesting thing. When we were about to leave, I find her mom made the sandwiches and bottles of soda, and they started to cry. And I looked at her. I said, this is amazing. You people are just like my people. That's what we do. My mom cries, and my father cries, and everybody. So I said, I see so much similarities in spite of our different worlds, but it was the same. It was a world full of love and caring. That's what it was. I saw that in her family, and that's why I love them. And I think she came to learn that my family are loving too.
Absolutely. We had to prove to both sets of parents that we're doing the right thing. So we had to work to make sure that they didn't say, I told you so, wouldn't work out.
Is there a message that you would want to give to your great-great-great-grandchildren that might be listening to this interview?
I hope I'll have grandchildren. First, I'm waiting patiently, waiting. But if I do, as they say in Arabic, inshallah, I would just tell them, just love one another, be good to each other, be kind to each other, and say your prayers every day.
Thank you so much, and I love you both so much.
I love you too, Sarah.
We love you too.
Well, Emil and Louise live in Illinois, so they cannot be here with us tonight. But their daughter, Sarah, is here to talk about why she decided to bring her parents to StoryCorps and when they're going to get grandchildren.
So, two thoughts. The first one is, have you ever heard a more elegant invocation of the Catholic guilt trip than my mother taking a sentimental opportunity to guilt trip me about my lack of producing grandchildren? And second, I think I come by my affinity for Irish whiskey, honestly. So, I first heard about StoryCorps through my dear friend and colleague, Mary Sinclair, who I'm so glad is here tonight. Mary recorded an interview with her husband, Louis Sinclair, who's one of my heroes and is a big reason of why I do the work I do, and he's no longer with us. Mary and Louis were some of the first folks in Atlanta to do a StoryCorps interview. They recorded it in, I believe it was the mobile StoryCorps van that was by the Martin Luther King Center for a while. And anyway, I just thought it was such an amazing idea, and after listening to it on the radio and hearing the podcast, I just wanted so badly to record some of our own family history. When I had my parents in town, I made an arrangement for them to come, and I just remember how nervous they were. You know, what is she going to ask us on the record? And it was really something. Somebody earlier talked about that sort of sense that you get when you're in the booth. It is this incredible moment of peace and clarity where you find intention and you find the courage to ask some of the questions that you've really been wanting to ask. And in a way that's sort of safe, because you do feel alone in that room, even though ultimately you may be broadcast. I think one of the things that I treasure the most about this piece is that because I don't live in the same place as my parents, I actually do, and I'm on the road a lot, and I actually do listen to the entirety of our interview. It's about 45 minutes long, as those of you who have done it know. This is just a teeny tiny piece of what we get to do. And so I'll be driving back from wherever, rural Georgia, Alabama, and listening to my parents talk. And it's so funny because I'll get home and then I'll get a text from my mother being like, "Are you home? Why didn't you call me?" And I'll have been feeling like, well, we just hung out for 45 minutes. What's the problem? But so I think what the larger story that y'all didn't really hear today, although I love the piece that was highlighted, I really do. What's most important to me about the StoryCorps experience and this actual tangible CD or audible piece of our history that I will have forever is that it documents the beginning of my family's time in the United States. We've talked tonight about how those of us from immigrant families learned about immigration in school as we experienced it. And I mean, I remember things like being told, like the analogy of the melting pot, where we all melt together and lose our individual characteristics and blend it up. And then they realized that maybe pushing assimilation, total assimilation, wasn't a good thing. So they switched it up to the salad bowl, right? And I'm like, and it was always just very odd to me because I'm an immigrant. I became a citizen when I was 16. I was naturalized when I was 16, and I couldn't ever quite appreciate that until I got older, just how much the nearness of our immigration experience has changed me and has affected my life. Somebody said earlier that being a refugee is a culture, being an immigrant is a culture, and it is something that is so core to who I am. And I wonder if those kids that I was in class with growing up, who would say, "Oh, I have family from Ireland," "Oh, I have family from China," or "I have family from whatever," if they actually had that same tangible story that they could listen to over and over again when they're adults and alone and driving in rural places, if we would really have so many struggles in our communities over things like borders, and when we keep those stories close, when we actually have an opportunity to tell the stories of ordinary people about their ordinary lives and their ordinary struggles, I just really would hope that would take away some of the negative politics that have surrounded immigration that has just broken my heart.